I stood outside the Hilton Ballroom in Queens, clutching my tote bag while the sound of a wedding band echoed through the doors. It was my sister Emily's big day, a $41,000 celebration with chandeliers, champagne, and every single relative dressed to impress every relative except me. I hadn't been invited, not by mistake, not because they forgot. I found out weeks earlier through a Facebook event page, and I saw the group chat where my parents and Emily agreed, "Don't invite Michelle, too much drama." So there I was, watching strangers take pictures with my family, realizing they had erased me from their perfect story. If your own family erased you from your sister's wedding, would you stay silent? Would you walk away, or would you fight back in front of everyone? And that was only the beginning. Back then, I lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Queens, New York. The building was old, the pipes rattled in the winter, and the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor's television every night. Rent ate nearly half my paycheck, and Sally Mae took the rest. My life felt like a cycle of bills and exhaustion. Each morning, I caught the F train into Manhattan, clutching a $5 Starbucks latte that I probably shouldn't have bought, whispering a prayer that my checking account wouldn't dip into overdraft again. Survival felt like my only routine. My family knew all of this, but it didn't change how they treated me. In their eyes, I was the difficult daughter, the one who never quite measured up. My older sister Emily, on the other hand, was their golden child. She got the spotlight, the praise, and most of the financial help. It was like we grew up in two different households, even though we shared the same roof. When Emily wanted to study abroad, my dad wrote a check like it was pocket change. When I begged for help covering tuition, he looked me in the eye and said, "Figure it out, you're independent, right?" That so-called independence turned into 10 years of loan statements stacking on my kitchen counter, each one heavier than the last. Meanwhile, Emily came home from Paris with stories, photos, and shopping bags that everyone admired. Family dinners made the favoritism impossible to ignore. Emily's updates about internships, vacations, or new boyfriends were treated like breaking news. Relatives leaned in, eyes wide, hanging on every word. When it was my turn to share, I barely got through one sentence before someone interrupted to ask Emily another question. If I dared to push back, my mom would sigh and whisper, "Let's not ruin the mood." That line became her shield and my gag order. One Christmas is burned into my memory. Emily tore open a box and pulled out a Gucci bag worth $3,700. She squealed, held it high, and the room exploded in applause. Flashbulbs went off as relatives snapped photos like it was the second coming. My turn came next. I peeled back wrapping paper to reveal a small envelope. Inside was a Starbucks gift card. $24. My dad chuckled. "That should cover you for a week." Laughter filled the room. I forced a smile while heat crawled up my neck, pretending it didn't sting. Moments like that piled up year after year. Emily had her car payments covered, spa weekends gifted, vacations booked in her name. I got jokes about being self-sufficient. Holidays felt less like family gatherings and more like staged theater, with me cast as the outsider who should clap politely from the wings. I swallowed my bitterness and called it strength, convincing myself silence was easier. But silence doesn't earn respect. It only teaches people how far they can go. And my family was just getting started. The pattern of favoritism never eased. If anything, it grew sharper as Emily and I entered adulthood. She seemed to glide on a carpet rolled out by my parents, while I stumbled across broken tiles they left behind for me to fix alone. Take birthdays, for example. Emily's birthday dinners were events. Balloons, expensive cakes, a restaurant that required reservations weeks in advance. Mine? A half-hearted happy birthday text from Dad, followed by Mom's apology about being too busy to plan something. One year, Emily received front-row concert tickets to see her favorite band. That same year, I got a used cookbook with a clearance sticker still stuck to the back. I laughed it off at the time, but deep down it cut me open. It wasn't just gifts, it was attention. Emily's milestones were celebrated like national holidays. She got her first big job offer, and my parents threw a party with champagne toasts. When I landed a steady office job, they nodded politely and asked if I had considered grad school, as if nothing I achieved was ever enough. The gap between us wasn't just financial. It was emotional. I was invisible unless I caused trouble, and invisibility wears you down. Holidays turned into performances I dreaded. At Thanksgiving, Emily was asked to carve the turkey, while relatives praised her knife skills like she was a surgeon. I was asked to clear plates. At Easter, Emily's boyfriend was seated front and center, treated like a future son-in-law years before the proposal. Whoever I brought along barely acknowledged. One cousin even whispered, "Why do they treat you like a guest in your own family?" I shrugged, but inside I wanted to scream. The biggest slap came when Emily wanted a car. She mentioned it casually at dinner, and within weeks, Dad had co-signed a loan and Mom had paid for her insurance. When my own beat-up sedan finally died, I begged for help. Dad frowned and said, "You should have saved better." Mom chimed in with, "We can't always bail you out." I ended up swiping my credit card for a down payment I couldn't afford, sinking deeper into debt while Emily drove around in her shiny new ride. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a chain of reminders that in my family's story, Emily was the heroine and I was a background character. The message was clear: she deserved investment and I deserved lectures about responsibility. I tried to convince myself it was cultural, that maybe some families just favored the eldest. But every time I saw Emily beam with gifts or applause, the knot in my stomach tightened. I kept telling myself to endure, to push forward, to let the bitterness roll off. But endurance has limits. A dam can only hold so much water before the cracks spread. My dam was already trembling, and the flood was coming sooner than anyone realized. By the time Emily's wedding plans surfaced, I had grown used to being sidelined. But nothing prepared me for the sting of learning about her big day the way I did. It wasn't through an invitation or even a phone call. It was through a Facebook notification. One evening, while scrolling absent-mindedly, I saw Emily Turner and Jonathan Reed created an event, wedding celebration at Hilton Ballroom. The page was public enough that it popped up on my feed, complete with the date, the venue, and a list of guests. I refreshed the page 3 times, thinking maybe my name hadn't loaded. But the more I scrolled, the clearer it became I wasn't invited. Every cousin, every distant aunt, even neighbors I barely remembered were listed, not me. My chest tightened, and my hands shook as I stared at the glowing screen. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't an oversight, it was deliberate. The next morning, I confronted my mom over the phone. "Is this a mistake?" I asked, my voice trembling. She hesitated for a beat too long before answering. "Michelle, it's just easier this way. We don't want drama at the wedding." My throat closed. Drama? I was her daughter. My dad didn't soften the blow either. "We need everything to go smoothly," he said. "Emily deserves her perfect day." Perfect day. Those words sliced through me like glass. Their message was crystal clear. My presence was incompatible with their version of perfection. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, realizing I had officially been erased from my own family's milestone. The humiliation didn't end there. Friends began calling to ask if I was excited for Emily's big day, assuming I'd be there. I lied, mumbling excuses about work conflicts, too ashamed to admit the truth. Each conversation felt like another layer of salt on a wound that wouldn't close. A week later, salvation came from an unexpected place. My old friend David Ramirez texted me late at night. "Check your email," he wrote. Attached was a screenshot of a group chat, my parents, Emily, and even Jonathan. The words burned. "Don't invite Michelle. Too much drama. She'll make it about herself." My stomach flipped. Proof. Undeniable proof that I wasn't paranoid, that my exclusion was intentional, orchestrated, and cruel. I printed the screenshots, highlighting the words that stung the most. For days, I stared at them taped above my desk, the evidence of betrayal in black and white. Each time I looked, my pulse raced and my jaw clenched. I couldn't decide which was worse, the decision to leave me out, or the laughter that followed in the thread. They hadn't just excluded me, they mocked me. For the first time, anger replaced shame. The humiliation that had once kept me quiet now fueled a dangerous question. Should I stay silent or finally speak up? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew the clock was ticking, and their perfect day was fast approaching. The week before the wedding, the tension in my chest became constant. Every phone call, every text from relatives reminded me that a celebration was happening without me. Still, I debated whether I should let it go. Part of me wanted to disappear, to prove I wasn't the drama they accused me of being. But another part, the louder part, whispered that silence would mean surrendering my dignity once and for all. The rehearsal dinner was when the situation truly escalated. I wasn't invited, of course, but photos flooded social media. Emily beamed in a designer dress, Jonathan at her side, my parents raising glasses of champagne. Captions read, "Perfect family, perfect night." My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications, each photo a reminder that I had been intentionally cropped out of their picture-perfect life. I called my dad again, hoping for a sliver of mercy. "Dad, do you really think excluding me is fair?" I asked. His voice was cold. "This isn't about you, Michelle. Emily deserves a flawless wedding, and you bring conflict." The words hit harder than any slap. My own father reduced me to a blemish, something to erase for the sake of appearances. My mom tried to soften it. "We'll make it up to you. Maybe we can do a dinner later, just the four of us." Her offer felt like salt in an open wound. I didn't want a consolation prize. I wanted recognition that I mattered, but in their eyes, I was expendable. David saw the shift in me before I admitted it to myself. He came over one evening, dropping takeout on my kitchen table. "You're too quiet," he said. I shrugged, staring at the screenshot still taped to my wall. "What am I supposed to do?" He leaned forward. "You don't let them write you out of the story. You show them the receipts." His words lingered. For the first time, I pictured walking into that ballroom, not as an uninvited guest, but as the truth-teller they feared. The image was intoxicating, the chandeliers glittering overhead, relatives gasping as I revealed the proof. For once, I wouldn't be invisible, I would be undeniable. But with that vision came fear. What if it backfired? What if people called me vindictive instead of brave? My reputation felt like a fragile glass I held in shaking hands. One wrong move, and it would shatter. Still, the idea of staying home while they toasted to family without me was unbearable. Every night that week, I rehearsed in my head what I would say, how I would present the evidence, the exact moment I would reveal it. I could hear the clink of silverware falling, the hush that would sweep across the ballroom. I could see Emily's painted smile cracking. The rehearsal wasn't just for her wedding anymore. It was for my reckoning. They had no idea what I was about to reveal. And the thought of it kept me alive when the hurt threatened to drown me. The morning of the wedding felt unreal. I woke before dawn, heart pounding, the screenshots neatly packed in a folder inside my tote bag. My laptop and a borrowed projector were strapped with cables, heavier than they should have been. I kept asking myself if I was insane, if crashing my sister's $41,000 wedding was too far. But then I remembered the laughter in that group chat. I remembered my dad's words, "You bring conflict." And suddenly the weight in my bag felt lighter than the rage in my chest. By the time I reached the Hilton ballroom, guests were arriving in waves, dressed in glittering gowns and tuxedos. I slipped into the crowd like a ghost. The chandeliers above sparkled as if mocking me. Waiters passed champagne flutes to cousins who looked right through me. I wasn't supposed to exist here, but here I was, breathing, burning, ready. The ceremony ended and the reception began. Music thundered, cameras flashed, speeches rolled out like a scripted play. Emily and Jonathan glided across the floor, the picture of perfection, while my parents beamed like royalty. I stood in the back, my palms damp, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during dinner. Plates clattered, silverware chimed, and the room buzzed with laughter. I walked forward, every step pulling the air tighter. Conversations died as people noticed me. My mom's smile faltered. My dad stiffened. Emily froze, fork halfway to her lips. I set my tote on a table, pulled out the projector, and connected it to my laptop. The screen lit up against a white wall, casting shadows across stunned faces. "You wanted a perfect night," I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "Let's make it honest." Click. The first screenshot appeared, the group chat. My name, my parents, Emily, Jonathan. The words in bold. "Don't invite Michelle, too much drama." Gasps rippled across the room. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." Click. Another message. "She'll ruin the photos." Click. "She doesn't belong." Each line burned brighter than the chandeliers above. Emily shot to her feet. "This isn't real," she snapped. My dad barked, "Turn that off." But I didn't stop. My voice grew sharper. "You wanted to erase me, to crop me out of my own family. Not tonight." I could feel the energy shift. Cousins shifted uncomfortably. Neighbors exchanged looks. Even the band stopped playing, their instruments hanging silent in the air. For the first time in years, all eyes were on me. Not Emily, not my parents. Me, and instead of shame, I felt power. My legs no longer shook. My voice no longer cracked. I was the storm they had tried to deny. The proof glowed behind me, undeniable, unforgettable. My mom whispered something to Emily, but her face was pale, her confidence gone. My dad clenched his fists, but he couldn't erase what the room had already seen. Jonathan looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The perfect wedding had shattered, replaced by truth. Still, I knew this was only the first blow. There was more to come, a deeper secret buried under their fragile lies, and I was ready to expose it next. The room was chaos after my reveal. Conversations erupted, whispers turned into shouts, and the once polished reception descended into uneasy murmurs. My father's face was red, his jaw clenched tight. "Enough!" he barked, slamming his hand against the table. "This is fabricated. Michelle is twisting things again." Emily stood beside him, trembling but defiant. "She photoshopped this. She's desperate for attention." "Don't believe her!" Her voice cracked, but she tried to disguise it with outrage. The Gucci clutch on her chair gleamed under the chandeliers, a reminder of years of favoritism they could no longer deny. I refused to flinch. You can scream all you want, but the truth doesn't vanish because you don't like it. I clicked again, projecting another screenshot. This one showed Jonathan chiming in. "Yeah, keep her out, she'll just ruin the vibe." Gasps swept the room again, this time with heads swiveling toward the groom. Jonathan's expression froze. He raised his hands, trying to calm the storm. I didn't mean it like that," he stammered. "It was a joke." But no one was laughing. Even his groomsmen looked away, uncomfortable. That's when David Ramirez stepped forward from the back of the room. His voice cut through the noise. "It's real, every single word. I was in that group chat and I sent Michelle the screenshots. She didn't fake anything. His presence was the blow my family hadn't prepared for. The credibility they thought they could shred had just been sealed by a living witness." The crowd shifted, cousins whispered, neighbors stared, an aunt shook her head in disgust. For years, my parents controlled the narrative, painting me as the troublemaker. But in that moment, the story cracked wide open. The audience they had so carefully cultivated turned against them. Emily's composure shattered. Her eyes darted between faces, searching for support. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "Michelle always makes everything about herself." "We just wanted peace," but her voice quivered, thin and unconvincing. Peace. That word again. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from shame, it was from fury. "You wanted peace for yourselves, not for me. You wanted silence, obedience, invisibility. And when I refused to disappear, you branded me as drama." My mom reached for my arm, desperation in her eyes. "Please, Michelle, stop this, not here." But the room had already turned. A neighbor muttered, "She deserves to be heard." A cousin said out loud, "They did her dirty." Each voice chipped away at their fortress of denial. Jonathan, trying to salvage dignity, raised his champagne glass. "Let's not ruin the evening." But the crowd cut him off with laughter, bitter and sharp. The irony was too thick to ignore. The perfect evening was already in ruins, and everyone knew who had caused the collapse. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful, standing in the wreckage of their lies. And as the silence stretched, I realized something even stronger. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice, and justice had only just begun. The ballroom buzzed with tension long after the projector went dark. Guests whispered, some avoiding my parents' eyes, others shaking their heads openly. The truth was out, but I knew exposure alone wasn't enough. For years, my silence had been their shield. Tonight, I needed to break that shield for good. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "I'm done being erased. I'm done being your scapegoat. From this moment on, I'm not part of your cover-ups anymore." My father tried to interrupt, but the weight of the room held him down. For once, no one rushed to protect him. No one laughed away his cruelty. My mom's lips trembled. "Michelle, we can fix this later, quietly." Her tone was pleading, but her eyes still searched for control. I shook my head. "No, quiet is what got us here. I'm finished protecting your reputation at the expense of my sanity." The room fell still again. I realized then that revenge wasn't just about embarrassing them. It was about reclaiming my voice, and that meant going public. I pulled out my phone, already open to Facebook. With a few taps, I uploaded the screenshots, tagging Emily, my parents, even Jonathan. My thumb hovered for a moment before pressing post. The notification chimed like a bell tolling the end of an era. Gasps rippled. A cousin muttered, "She actually posted it." Another whispered, "Good for her." I watched the likes and shares appear in real time, spreading like wildfire beyond the walls of the Hilton. There would be no burying this under polite smiles or whispered denials. Their perfect narrative was collapsing in digital ink. Emily lunged toward me, eyes wild. "How could you? This is my wedding!" Her voice cracked under the weight of panic. I met her glare evenly. "You built your wedding on lies. Consider this the bill coming due." Jonathan reached for Emily's arm, trying to pull her back, but she shook him off. My dad clenched his fists, his face blotchy with rage, yet he didn't move. He couldn't. The evidence was bigger than his anger now. My mom whispered, "Please, Michelle, think about the family." I snapped back. "I am. I'm thinking about the family you tried to erase me from." The ripple spread quickly. Guests who once saw me as dramatic now muttered words of support. One aunt said, "She deserves better." A neighbor shook her head at my parents. Years of being labeled the problem child unraveled in minutes, replaced by a narrative I had written myself. For years I had begged for scraps of acknowledgement. Now I gave myself something better, closure. My voice didn't shake anymore. My hands were steady. I felt the knot in my stomach unwind for the first time in decades. I turned to leave, my tote slung over my shoulder. Behind me, voices rose again, fragments of shock and disbelief. But I didn't stop. Each step felt lighter, as if I were walking out of their cage and into my own story. Still, as I pushed open the ballroom doors, a thought flickered. Revenge wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning, and I had no idea how much further it would take me. In the weeks after the wedding, my life shifted in ways I hadn't expected. The fallout was messy, loud, and everywhere. Relatives filled my inbox with mixed messages, some praising me for standing up, others accusing me of tearing the family apart. Old neighbors stopped me in the grocery store to whisper, "Good for you." At the same time, I saw Facebook posts from family members calling me ungrateful. But instead of shrinking under the weight of gossip, I felt lighter. For once, the story was mine to tell. I poured my energy into building a future that didn't orbit around their approval. The first step was moving. I traded my cramped Queens apartment for a small but bright place in Manhattan, overlooking the skyline I used to admire from a distance. Unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, I felt the strange thrill of starting fresh. Every corner of that space was mine. No ghosts of judgment, no echoes of condescension, just me. At work, something shifted too. Colleagues who had only known me as quiet Michelle suddenly saw me differently. "You look free," one coworker said during lunch. She wasn't wrong. For the first time, I joined after-work gatherings, laughing without worrying about whether I measured up to someone else's standard. Independence stopped being a burden and became a badge of honor. My confidence trickled into meetings as well. I spoke up, pitched ideas, and people listened. It felt like I had stepped out of a shadow I didn't realize I had lived under for years. David stuck by my side, reminding me that allies exist even when family fails. We grabbed tacos after late nights, dissecting the chaos that followed the wedding. He teased me about becoming a local legend. "You're trending, you know," he said once, holding up his phone. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt surreal. People weren't laughing at me anymore. They were laughing with me or cheering for me. That shift in tone, from mockery to admiration, felt like a rebirth. The biggest step came months later. I walked into a dealership and signed the papers for a Tesla Model 3. Sliding into the driver's seat, I felt a rush of pride. No one co-signed for me, no one handed me keys out of favoritism. It was mine, paid for by my own resilience. As the car hummed to life, I thought back to the nights I cried over bills, the holidays I felt invisible. Now the engine purred like proof that invisibility was over. It wasn't just a car, it was freedom on wheels. I built routines that belonged to me. Saturday morning runs in Central Park, Sunday afternoons in cooking classes, Friday evenings sharing wine with new friends who valued me for who I was, not where I ranked in a family hierarchy. I decorated my new apartment with colors I loved, hosted small dinners without fear of comparison, and finally understood what peace felt like. Each day stitched together a new version of myself, stronger, louder, unapologetic. Looking back, I realized the wedding wasn't the end of something. It was the fracture that finally set me free. I no longer needed a seat at their table. I had built my own, and every mile I drove through Manhattan streets reminded me they couldn't erase me, not anymore. Months later, the dust from Emily's wedding still hadn't settled. The story had spread far beyond the Hilton ballroom, carried on whispers at church, gossip in the neighborhood, and shares on Facebook. My family, once so eager to showcase their perfect image, now lived under a spotlight of shame they couldn't dim. At Sunday service, I heard from a friend that the Turners slipped in late and left early, avoiding eye contact with the congregation. The pastor's sermon about honesty and humility landed heavier than any hymn, and people noticed. The stares, the whispers, the subtle avoidance, it all painted a picture louder than words. For once, their silence cost them more than mine ever had. Emily and Jonathan tried to salvage their reputation, posting smiling photos from a belated honeymoon in Cabo. But the comments section told the real story. "Is this the sister you cut out?" one person wrote. Another added, "Money can't buy character." Each post became a battlefield they couldn't win. My dad, once a man of unshakable pride, stopped attending community meetings. Neighbors who once admired his authority now saw him as a hypocrite. My mom avoided calls from relatives who had sided with me, too ashamed to face their disappointment. The fortress they had built on appearances crumbled one brick at a time. Relatives who had laughed at my expense began sending quiet messages. An aunt apologized for staying silent too long. A cousin admitted, "We all saw the favoritism, we just never thought you'd fight back." Their words came late, but they confirmed what I had always known. The truth was undeniable. Justice didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived in the slow, steady unraveling of the lies they had clung to. Their punishment wasn't jail or exile, it was exposure. Everyone saw them for who they were, and they had to live with it. For me, that was enough. I didn't need more revenge. Their shame was its own sentence, one that echoed louder than any speech I could ever give. Standing on the other side of everything, I finally understood something simple but powerful. Family doesn't always mean love. Sometimes family is just the people who share your last name, not the people who protect your heart. And once I accepted that, I stopped begging for their approval and started building my own peace. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights when I missed the idea of family, when I scrolled through old photos and wondered if things could have been different. But then I remembered the group chat, the exclusion, the laughter at my expense. And I knew the truth. Sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself. Justice didn't come with applause or trophies. It came quietly, in the strength I felt when I closed my apartment door and knew I was safe. It came in the mornings when I brewed coffee in my own kitchen without dread of criticism. It came in the hum of my Tesla on the open road, reminding me I had powered my own escape. That was justice enough. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. My parents wanted silence. Emily wanted invisibility. Instead, I gave them the one thing they couldn't erase, the truth. They'll live with that truth for the rest of their lives, whether they admit it or not. And me? I'll live with freedom. So now I turn the question to you. If you were in my shoes, if your own family erased you from your sister's $41,000 wedding, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet, swallowed the pain, and let them keep the spotlight? Or would you have stood up, no matter the cost, and forced them to face the truth? Because at the end of the day, revenge stories aren't just about payback. They're about reclaiming the pieces of ourselves that others tried to bury. And if my story proves anything, it's that silence is not the same as peace. Sometimes, justice demands a voice. Thank you for listening to my story here on Heartless Revenge. If this true family revenge story resonated with you, please like the video, subscribe to Heartless Revenge, and share your own experiences in the comments. On this channel, every voice matters, and your story could inspire the next tale of justice served.